everyone. I'm taking a short break from my 1930s project to address something that I saw this morning on Facebook. During my morning scroll, I ran across a Facebook page called Feminist News that posted the following quote, "Back then, marriages used to last. Yeah, because your grandmother couldn't open a bank account or file for divorce without a man. She had no rights and nowhere to go." So the premise that the page was putting forth was that in the good old days, many women stayed in unhappy and even abusive marriages because they had few other options. And this shouldn't be framed as a good thing. And I would say I agree with that premise overall. And of course, this came with a landmine of comments. Big old comment section running into the 2000s. So I read a few of them because I hate myself and I can't help myself, and I just really need to farm that outrage because I knew what these comments were likely to be like. And some comments checked this premise against their own personal experience and said, yeah, it was like this in my family. My grandmother was miserable. My grandmother hanged herself. A lot of stories of desperate situations from the, quote, good old days. And then there were others who came in and said it wasn't like this. Some commenters talked about how their grandmothers and their mothers were able to escape and get out and build lives of their own. But the comments that I found most troubling, and the ones, again, I hate myself, so I read the comments, and I knew these kinds of comments were going to be there. The volatile generalizations, where you have people on one side declaring marriage is always a prison. Why is anybody still getting married? Men are abusers by nature. Marriage only benefits men. And then on the other side, because for some reason misogynists really like to post on a page called Feminist News. Why? Don't ask me. Probably just to make people angry because they just need that in order to have a good day. With things like repeal the 19th Amendment, women don't deserve equal rights, feminism is against God. And probably the one that made me cringe the hardest was, yeah, things were better back when women knew how to shut up. So these comments, most of them did come from men, but some of them came from women as well, particularly when they brought God into it. And feminism hates children. Yeah, that was another big one. Feminism hates children. Feminism is destroying the family, all this sort of thing. And this hostility made me sad because it was just a reminder to me of how much men and women seem to hate one another these days. There's a whole cottage industry of gender-based generalizations and talk about how men and women can't and shouldn't trust one another. And I call myself a feminist who believes in marriage. And this has never been what I have fought for. What I'd really like to see is a future where women and men like each other, respect each other, enjoy one another's company. So that's what I want to address today, because another comment came in the form of a question. What do you think a good marriage looks like? And of course, you had people answering that question with, it's a marriage where the man goes off to work and earns enough money to support the family, and the woman stays home, has kids, supports her man, that kind of thing. The traditional marriage, the 1950s and earlier kind of marriage. But what does a good marriage look like? So I'm going to try to answer that question because I remember seeing my parents when I was growing up, watching them and seeing them now as well. They have been married since 1962. And when I was growing up, I saw them enjoy being together, doing activities together. They were often in plays together and in choir together and had the same friends that they enjoyed hanging out with together. And of course, fight through rough times together because it wasn't perfect because no marriage is, but theirs was a partnership. So I grew up seeing a partnership marriage. And that was what I wanted for myself if I was ever lucky enough to find it. I wasn't going to settle for anything less. Well, I didn't meet the man who would become my husband until I was in my 30s. And thankfully, his experience with his parents was not unlike mine. His parents are still married, they are still married, and theirs was a partnership marriage. So we both knew what that looked like. So, thinking about my own marriage, it's not perfect because no marriage is. But we enjoy spending time together. We respect each other. We ask each other's opinions. We respect each other's opinions. We know when to give each other space, and we know we have each other's backs. And so, what does a good marriage look like? I would say that a good marriage is one where the two people involved love each other for who they are and not just for what they can do for each other. Because I've seen that kind of rhetoric, who benefits from marriage? Marriage only benefits men. And I've heard people say marriage only benefits women. So, what do we get out of this? What do we want? What do we get out of this? Rather than a situation where you have two adult human beings who love and respect each other for who they are, flaws and all, and who help one another grow. And that's the kind of marriage that I want to see more of. I want more marriages like this to happen. But the answer is not, as some of these posters seem to think, to go back to a system that made it hard for people to leave abusive spouses. A system that basically tethered husbands and wives together economically, where you couldn't leave. Not just a situation where you wouldn't leave, but for a lot of people, you couldn't leave. That's not the answer. And the answer certainly is not to go back to a time when we told boys that the most important thing about them was their brains, and girls that the most important thing about them is their looks. We don't want that. We've moved on from that. What we had back then was not good. We do not need to idealize the quote good old days when a lot of people stayed in bad marriages because they had no choice. Yes, good marriages did happen back then, but to put economic roadblocks in place to prevent people from leaving bad marriages was never the right thing to do. What we have now, though, where men and women don't like one another, they don't trust one another, that's not all that good either. I know that good marriages exist, not just because my husband and I have been married 17 years and counting, and that both our parents are also still married. not just because of that. I mean, we see these partnership marriage in our friend group as well. But society as a whole seems to be pulling women and men further apart and feeding off these hostile generalizations. So, what we have now isn't so great either. We can do better. We can do a better job of building a world in which men and women like each other and value each other for who they are as individuals. I believe that with imagination and empathy and patience, we can build something better. The answer isn't looking to the past for a model. The answer is to model good, positive, healthy possibilities, to model those in our personal lives, and to see some representation in the stories that we tell. So that's all I got for you today. I have already made some notes on my next 1930s project video, so I'll be coming back to you with that again very soon. So thanks for listening. Have a good day.